Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order, a West Coast Committee meeting. We're all over, we're on Zoom, and I'm in the boardroom, and I would like to recognize that we are in the traditional territory of the Nuu-chah-nulth nations all over the island. So welcome, and we want to recognize that and appreciate that fact as well. I notice to all the attendees and delegates that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the Regional District website. And next, I would like to introduce the board table. From Ucluelet, we have Rochelle Cole. From the Ucluelet Nation, Alan McCarthy. And from Tofino, Mr. Tom Steer. And in the boardroom with me is Terry Fong, our acting CAO and CFO. Item number 2, approval of the agenda. I'd like a motion to approve any late items. I don't know that there are any late items, none. And approval of the meeting held on of the current agenda. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Tom. And item 3 is minutes. The West Coast Committee meeting held October the 6th, 2021. And a motion that the minutes of the West Coast Committee meeting held on October 6th, 2021 be received. Okay. Thanks, Rochelle. Next, we have petitions, delegations, and presentations. And with these presentations, we would recommend a 10-minute maximum. If it goes beyond 10 minutes, I will put my hand up and get approval from the rest of the committee. Now, I don't see Mr. Bob Hansen here. He was first on the list. Is Marianne? Oh, Marianne Paquette. Oh, there you are. So please, Marianne, carry on. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, if I'm able to share my screen. Can everybody see the screen here?
Yes, you're good.
Awesome. Thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Marianne, and I work with WildSafe BC as the Preschool Setsumakoa Community Coordinator. And my program area covers parts of the traditional territories and treaty settlement lands of the Ucluelet First Nation and Toquet Nation. And the program serves the communities and businesses that are located in this specific area, with a focus on the treaty settlement lands of both nations and the ACRD Area C, such as the communities of Hitatsu, Makoa, Millstream, Port Albion, Salmon Beach, and the Tofino-Ucluelet Junction. So in terms of wildlife activity, there has been a low number of reports this season in each community. So far this season, with all communities combined, there has been a total of 16 black bear reports to the RAP line, and garbage was the most reported attractant this year. One wolf sighting was reported to the Conservation Officer Service early in the year, and no cougar activity has been reported this season. And it's important to note that this represents only a fraction of the wildlife sightings or conflicts, since only a small number of events are actually communicated to the RAP line each year. And there is still a hesitance to communicate wildlife interaction with the Conservation Officer. However, speaking with community members and experts in the area, it seems like there has been very little conflict in these communities this year, which is very encouraging, and we're hoping for the trend to continue. So the program focuses its efforts on outreach and educational activities with the goal of preventing conflict with wildlife, promoting coexistence with the local fauna, and enhancing public safety with each community. So here's a short summary of the program's key deliverables over the course of the season. So both the Preschool Setsumakoa program and Pacific Rim program teamed up to give 8 WildSafe Ranger presentations in the local schools. So we reach over 195 youth and teachers. 6 presentations were given to community groups reaching 72 participants. 461 people were reached through door-to-door activities. 4 display booths were held during the season, reaching a total of 327 people. 58 Facebook posts were created, and the local page followers increased from 35 to 120 since January 1st. And there are now 2 campgrounds that are participating in the Bear Campsite program, and 6 were contacted and offered support. 6 articles were created for the local YG newsletter and the Umakuk quarterly publication. And this year, with all the activities combined, the program was successful in reaching over 1,250 people. So additionally, a bear hazard assessment for the program coverage area was completed in 2020. And this season, I was able to facilitate the first 2 Bear Stewardship Committee meetings to address specific challenges regarding human black bear coexistence in the region. And those were identified in the report. And we also started working towards a Bear Smart community status. A bin monitoring program was launched for the community of Hitatsu to raise awareness around the importance of keeping the community bins well secured at all times. And next season, we hope to grow the interest in the program and have additional volunteers taking part in this initiatives to really create a broader community awareness. And to celebrate the 2021 BC Goes Wild event, both the Preschool Setsumakoa program and the Pacific Rim program collaborated on a contest that had the purpose to encourage residents to share pictures and videos of their WildSafe activities. And we were really grateful to receive some donated prize from 5 local businesses for our contest winners. And the contest post on Facebook reached over 1,950 people. Additionally, 1 electric fence was installed around the Toquid Nations Community Garden in Makoa, and this was a collaboration between the Preschool Setsumakoa program, the Pacific Rim program, and the Toquid Nation government. And the initiative would not have been possible without the subsidy funds provided by the ACRD. So the community garden had been an attractant for wildlife in the past, and it had been damaged by a black bear trying to access it. The garden is surrounded by really great wildlife habitats and backs onto the forest, and it's also near well-used wildlife corridors. And this area has been identified as a potential hotspot in the bear hazard assessment report, and the solution proposed was electric fencing, which was achieved this year. So opportunities for next season include providing more staff training for Bear Campsite program operators and WildSafe businesses, along with additional opportunities for bear spray workshop and wildlife awareness and safety in-person presentations, and continue to progress towards Bear Smart community designation status. There would be potential to grow the volunteer network, develop more opportunities for youth engagement in each community, and collaborate with the Ufluthat Government Culture and Heritage Department to create additional educational materials on wildlife coexistence. And moving forward, these initiatives and collaborations will really help keep wildlife wild and the community safe. So thank you, everyone. That's it on my end.
Thank you, Marianne. Much appreciated the work that you have done. And I see Bob Hansen's there as well. Hi, Bob. I did attend your bear stewardship meeting last month, and it was really helpful at that point. I think I saw Tom, Director Steer, putting up electric fence around a chicken coop or something, but I could have been mistaken. I did that, as I mentioned earlier, around our apple trees, and it worked really, really well. So from my end, much appreciated, great program and great events that you've hosted. And I'll be looking forward to some perhaps in the spring at areas like Salmon Beach. Anyway, thank you for that. Are there any other questions from any of the other members? Oh.
I'll just make a comment. Thank you for this. I think we need to be doing more, obviously, at least at our council table in Ucluelet. There's been certainly a lot of letters, and it's been a hot topic over the last few weeks of the amount of bears being killed in our area, I guess, is the subject line in most of these emails. So yeah, just looking forward to doing better, I guess.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Bob, I don't know, and thank you, Marianne, appreciate the report. Bob, are you going to be giving a synopsis of from the Pacific Rim and sort of the other 2 locations? I will hold off my comments until I hear that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I don't know, Bob, did you want anything else? Did you have anything else to say?
I also have a short presentation, 5-minute presentation, if that was possible, if able to share my screen, if there's time.
Yeah, that's fine. No other issues from anybody else? Alan or Tom or anybody? Michelle? No. Go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Thanks very much for the opportunity to present. It's always great to be able to connect with everyone and to provide an overview of the season and all of the activities. And Marianne has covered very well, touched on many of the various activities that we undertook. As you can see, we work very closely together in the region. My area of program coverage is from Clayoquot Sound down to Ucluelet. I'm going to present my report in 3 parts, basically a story of 2021 that will be a little bit different in that it's been such a remarkable year. I felt needed to highlight some of the characteristics of this season, and then talk again about some of the prevention and response activities of the Pacific Rim program. And also, as a third portion, is just the way ahead, working to prevent the cycle of what we've been seeing this year. So the first part of this is a bit disturbing. And as some of you, like Rochelle, you alluded to, and here's basically just the bare facts of it. 50 plus incidents involving property damage this year. And that's sheds of all descriptions, chicken coops, vehicles, and households. 13 bears killed. That makes 30 bears that have died due to human causes in the past 3 years. And 10 of those were due to vehicle collisions, and then 28 in conflicts, and 13 so far this year. There is still a trap set in Ucluelet and a trap set in Tofino, and there's multiple food condition bears active in both communities right now. Really stood out this year, more aggressive incidents in terms of behaviors on the bear parts. They're highly food condition bears, and there have been multiple bluff charges and 2 instances of people deploying bear spray. In terms of the structural damage, it's all descriptions. Anything stored outside in terms of garbage, recycling, has been fair game for the bears this year. And just since Friday, I've had 6, or actually, as of an hour ago, 7 sheds reported broken into since Friday. So the numbers are climbing, still climbing. Chickens this year, really dramatic departure from the last 2 years where there were no reports of incidents involving chicken coops. This year, 12 different instances. And vehicles. So again, something different and from past years. So garbage stored in vehicles has also been fair game. In terms of, so that gives you a sense of this year and its many sort of remarkable characteristics and very challenging characteristics of this year. In terms of reports to the RAP line, it's up over 425% from last year. So As of today, we're at 261 reports, up from 44 last year. And thankfully, cougar and wolf activity has been about the same or lower this year. In terms of program activities, and again, Marianne touched on many of these, and we partnered on some of this, but 14 WildSafe Ranger presentations, over 150 youth involved, 12 presentations given to the community groups, 130 participants, 400 plus people reached through door-to-door education, canvassing of neighborhoods in the two communities. Display booths, the BC Goes Wild that Marianne talked about, multiple Facebook posts, and that's continuing. And the number of followers is now up to over 1,100, and that's an increase of over 200 this year. And 6 businesses that we're actively working with on becoming part of the WildSafe BC Business Pledge program. Marianne touched on the Bear Campsite program, and 14 electric fencing installations with support from ACRD subsidy funds, and have 12 parties that have engaged with, done site inspections, and they're in the queue for next year. So in terms of the way ahead and breaking this cycle is, I know both bylaw services and Tofino and Ucluelet have been very hard at work, and we've been collaborating on that initiative to bring forward a wildlife attractant management bylaw. So a standalone bylaw that covers and addresses and provides compliance tools for all of the situations I touched on, plus many others. And drawing from the experience of a number of municipalities that have had this kind of bylaw package in place for many years. An example of that is Squamish. So drawing heavily on the experiences of other municipalities. Pursuit of the Bear Smart status for both communities. There's been so much good work done in recent years, and actually, when you look at it, with the infrastructure improvements, the public education programs, bylaws potentially coming, becoming upgraded or strengthened, both communities are very close to meeting the requirements for Bear Smart status, and that would send a very clear message to residents and to visitors alike that the communities are fully committed to coexistence and keeping wildlife wild and the community safe. And also part of the way ahead is continued support for WildSafe BC. I think both Marianne and I were going flat out this season, and I know we had a lot of really positive feedback from businesses, residents, visitors, and others, and the nations, all levels of government, that they really appreciated the kinds of services that WildSafe BC provides. So that's all I had, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Bob, and thank you, Marianne. We look forward to continuing to support WildSafe BC and Bear Smarting as we did last year. And I understand from Terry that the funds that we supported were up to $20,000. So great work by all of you. And as I said, Marianne, in the spring, I'd like you to get you again out to the West Coast, and we'll see if we can get some people around Salmon Beach and other areas smarted, if you will. Thanks. Are there any other comments or
Like
questions?
that term.
Thanks, Tom. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and Bob, thank you. We've worked very closely, as you know, and I thank you for charting the way ahead, and it gives us some of the tools that we can actively support and get behind. So it is a call to action, and you've laid it out clearly in front of us. And I'm wondering if thank you from the ACRD level. At the District of Tofino level, obviously this presentation would be of value at an upcoming committee of the whole to solidify. I know there is strong support at all levels, and I know that the bylaw work that's being done, I think, will be critical. And once again, thank you for those efforts. And just a little side anecdote in terms of the supports from WildSafe BC. They are critical to the success of all of the programs. There's no question of that. And a small example is the work, Bob, on the chicken coops. I was one of those. I had an electric fence installed. It obviously, I was fortunate not to have a major incident, but it was identified by Bob and WildSafe BC. We remediated that and have not had an incident. In fact, the interactions have been such that the deconditioning, I don't know if I could use that term, but certainly there's been direct evidence of how effective that has been in my particular case. So I want to thank WildSafe BC for that. And I will be looking forward to further supporting the programs and ensuring that Bear Smart status is a priority for our communities.
Thanks for that, Tom. And thank you again, both Bob and Marianne, for your report. And we look forward to hearing better things next year. So
Absolutely.
Next up, we have Mr. James Rogers, Executive Director and co-founder of the CARE Network, regarding lease amendments. Go ahead, James.
Hi, everybody. Joining you from Long Beach Airport, where we have the CARE Network Animal Shelter. Still a very rudimentary setup, but it is working, and yes, very busy with animals, as we have been for the last 2 years that we've been out here. Maybe I'll just start with a quick introduction. Again, James from the CARE Network. We've been helping animals and their families out here from basically Clayoquot and Barkley Sound area for about 10 years now. And so having the facility here at the airport has been a game changer for us. I think maybe it was the last presentation I gave, some of the numbers from 2020. We worked with about 750, 780 animals over that year. And that's just not possible without the facility that we have here. COVID, of course, was a bit of a factor. I think the numbers were higher because of COVID. But it also sort of pointed to the fact that we are considered an essential service out here. We work with all the Indigenous governments on their animal, either bylaws or regulations, acts and regulations, in terms of helping to facilitate those. And certainly through the pandemic, it was recognized that the services that we provide do assist with community health and safety for all members of the community. We actually saw an increase in dog bite incidents and dog fights, and those happening around children and other members of the community. Right at the beginning of COVID, how's it, has the two docks, so, traffic kind of goes to both. Typically, with one of them shut down, we saw some territorial issues come up with dogs following people to a different dock. And so we had a bit of a spike there. Regardless, I guess the presentation today is a request for the West Coast Committee to recommend to the ACRD board approval of our proposal to extend from our current short-term lease here at the airport, which I believe is a 3 year plus 3 year arrangement, which is, I think, the typical or the only option out here right now, to a 20-year arrangement that would include taking over the dilapidated building next to where we are currently situated. And that building is one of the World War II structures, what we believe was the officer's mess back in the day. And the vision for that is for that to become our base of operations and sort of our primary spot for housing cats, just to keep everybody separate and safe. That building has, I guess, been shut down or, boarded up because of asbestos and maybe some other toxins. So currently it's sitting at a, what are the numbers? I think it's about $169,000 liability for the ACRD right now. And that's whether it falls down, which it's sort of slowly doing. There's holes in the roof. So the place is getting worse by the year, and these storms aren't helping. So $169,000 liability as it stands. What we'd like to do is take that over in the area around it to rehabilitate it. Because even if that building comes down, that cost to remediate stands, and nothing can then be built there because of its proximity to a gully. However, if we can save it before it falls down and remediate that those toxins, we can essentially turn let's say $170,000 liability into a $450,000, $500,000 asset. But we need some time to make that happen. So 3-year leases aren't going to do it for fundraising to come up with the $500,000, give or take, that's going to be needed to get that operational. We have sought the support of the Indigenous governments that we work with. And one of the primary letters of support that would have accompanied our proposal is that from the Tloquit government. Everyone's probably familiar with the history of this land. I believe there's some good records about how the Tloquit lent this land to the federal government back in the day. It just simply wasn't returned after the war effort. So we actually asked the Tloquit for their permission first to extend to a longer term lease, 20-year lease. Or actually, we had asked for 40. And they came back and said they would be happy with 20. So that's the proposal in front of you, in front of the ACRD board. And again, the idea being that we can continue these services out here that support community health and safety. And given that the SPCA in Port Alberni doesn't extend their services this far, we see it as a pretty big need, especially when you look at some of the numbers. I guess the other piece to the proposal is looking for support. My understanding is the asbestos and whatnot, really that cost ultimately, I guess, should fall on the shoulders of the federal government from, again, back in the day, the 40s or 50s, when they were putting vermiculite into things. And I understand there's environmental studies that have been happening and conversations with the federal government to, get some funds to take care of that cleanup. So what we would hope is that if we take this on, that should those negotiations prove fruitful, that those funds would follow through to the building, even if we at that point had either an extended lease, the 20-year lease, or my understanding is if a long-term lease is still not possible for various reasons, like the environmental situation and the federal government funding of cleanup, I'd like to propose a license of operation as an alternative to that, again, at a 20-year term with a 20-year option. The point being, we really need time in order to amortize the costs that will be involved. And in order to, apply for grants, that kind of timeline is needed. One other thing I'd mention is through this whole process, we have, over the last couple of years, we have improved the site already. We've hooked up with BC Hydro, so the site now has power. We still don't have sewer, so we'd be hoping to get that going at some point soon. And that's another conversation about support. Last I heard $7,000 for an engineer's drawing. Seemed like a pretty steep price tag, but yeah, sort of improvements already made, not to mention just our presence here with security and keeping people out of the forest and building saunas, as you may know, close to here that have previously burnt down. So our presence is certainly keeping through the busy summer where people are camping pretty much everywhere out here on the West Coast. We were able to drive people off some of the surrounding areas here. I think that covers most of what I wanted to talk about. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks for that, James. Much appreciated. Any questions from any of the West Coast Committee members? Hearing or seeing no. Tom, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, just thank you, James. I appreciate once again the coming forward to the ACRD and recognizing the service that that the care provides. I think what's going to be happening here, we're going to be getting a report later on the agenda regarding the overall planning for the airport lands. And I think within that conversation, this obviously will be part, it will be integrated into that conversation around, for example, the long-term leasing, site contamination, and generally an overall plan for there. So many of the things may be addressed at that point rather than asking them directly at this point in time. So I'll be awaiting that report, and I think it might answer a lot of the questions that I have going forward.
Thank you. And through the chair, if I could just respond, is that possible?
Yep, go ahead.
Great. Well, that's great. I look forward to hearing how that presentation goes or that report goes. And again, I would just sort of put it out there that, again, should a long-term lease not be possible, we would still be seeking some method or mechanism to move forward, again, to get some entitlement. What my biggest priority right now is just to get a new roof, which I think we can get mostly donated, a professional new roof, just to stop the building from decaying anymore. And again, I think there are mechanisms like license of operation that municipalities and regional districts can use where leases may not be viable for one reason or another. But again, my hope is that we don't simply put this off for further environmental studies or negotiations with federal governments that could take more years, maybe even more decades, given the pace of things on their end.
Okay, well, thanks, James. Appreciate it. And are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Next, we have requests for decisions. And the first one is request for a decision with regards to the campground development issues at Long Beach. And who do we have on that? Jenny? Thanks, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so that was a really good lead-in to this report. So this is a bit of a lengthy report, and I'm going to take my time to maybe do a bit of an overview and have a fulsome discussion. We can speak more to specifically James's issue or other items, but I felt like it was important to more broadly talk about development because we have a lot of issues that are really across the board and present a lot of challenges as we move forward with all of these opportunities at the airport. So specifically, this report also addresses a bit of the campground issue. So at the August meeting, the committee recommended that we investigate the development of a campground for West Coast workers. So this report also talks a bit specifically about some of the challenges to do with that. But again, these are broad issues that we kind of need to address in general. It's important to keep in mind what our core objectives for the airport are, and really fundamentally it is the operation of an airport. So that means safely operating the airport, and the staff that are out there do a fantastic job of that with limited resources. We did have some challenges this year with staffing. We had a vacancy that we filled, and they did an amazing job sort of trying to just cover off that and keep the basis of operation going. really the benefits to having an airport and having that operation is that, you know, it supports the economic activities on the West Coast. It's the method for tourism transportation for a lot of things, community wellness, because local people have access to an airport to move other places, as well as the medevac and emergency services capacity. So the airport in its core services does really well. And in order to achieve just those operations, the safety standards and regulations, it's really quite resource intense and expensive. And that is why we have quite a hefty tax requisition. So also, we see that we do have a secondary objective, which is to reduce that tax requisition. And we do have opportunities through revenue generation, through the development of land. There's other minor opportunities with landing passenger fees. We've added in the airport maintenance fees. We've tried to do some small revenue generation, and we'll continue to work on those. But really, it's quite evident that development is going to be an opportunity to make the airport more self-sustaining financially, hopefully. So easy win maybe, but to date, we've really been struggling. So a lot of it is, we've got a number of things: site servicing capacity, contamination, and so we have a lot of interest that is generated from nonprofits. We've got BC Transit looking at this as an opportunity. We've got the West Coast multiplex opportunity, things like campground development, potentially if that is for West Coast housing. And then also external interests, which would be building hangars or other just lease rental for economic purposes. Site servicing is one of the first concerns that we really have identified. And so this year we started doing a capacity for the water and sewer system. So how are we going to service all this potential future development? And so we wanted to look at what is our current servicing for water and sewer. I had hoped to have a report to the committee, but we're still working on it. It is a complex issue when we look at servicing and what the alternative and options are. So right now we have a small on-site water system that uses wells. We wanted to look at what the capacity of that is, and then how do we meet potential future capacity. And we know we've got the multiplex, and we can sort of put some guesswork into what would build out look like, what would those demands be. The sewer systems are the bigger challenge because we are likely completely at capacity, and that might limit a lot of development. So we really do want to make sure that we finish this site servicing study first and look at what we need to do, because right now we might actually have to be investing in some upgrades. Otherwise, all future development would have to have holding tanks, pump and haul, or install our own on-site septic. Those aren't necessarily the most cost effective, and nor do they encourage development. So there is economies of scale when you're looking at larger community systems for those. The land use plan is another one that we struggle with. So we've run into this. I think one of the good examples was we tried really hard to start working through the process of a long-term lease with Tisdale. And so we had gone to the trouble, we really started looking into what that looks like. And so that interested party is no longer interested because the risk was too high. But one of the issues we identified through that process was the land use plan. So we want to make sure that the work that we're doing is in line with the land use plan. And in 2018, there was a lot of work done to update the land use plan, and we have a final draft, but it's not yet adopted. So that is challenging because it really results in a lack of clarity on what can and can't be done. So we really need to look at adopting that plan. So we want to revisit that. Part of the importance of that is making sure that we are engaging with all parties and making sure that everyone is on board with the direction that we're moving forward with. I'll talk later about the campground and one of the concerns we have where there might not be an alignment with the current draft land use plan. Not that we can change it, but if that is our plan, we need to be aligned with it. Contaminated sites. So further on, we've got a report for information about what we've done next in the contaminated sites. But essentially, because it was an active airport and because of the changes with all of the contaminated sites regulation, we have to, the requirements are, because of the zoning and activity, we have to do a preliminary site investigation at minimum if we're going to be entering into registered long-term leases more than 3 years. Apparently, as of February, we also have to do that for any building permits. So the cost for that starts to really rise. We have completed a stage 1, which I'll talk about later on the agenda. But that's been really helpful information for us. So we've invested some money, a lot of time to look at that and see if there are at least some areas of the airport that could move forward with long-term leases because the stage 1 says, okay, no, this is fine, it's clear, there's no contamination. And assuming that that would satisfy the needs for registering. But there are a number of properties and the higher value, higher sought ones that do need further investigation before they're cleared. So that would be, the next step would be a stage 2, which is very expensive. And then we can look at that. Now, for the areas that are not cleared by the stage 1, but are not necessarily contaminated, like we did find, we spoke about this at the last West Coast Committee, we found a lot of asbestos that we were not aware of when we were doing the stage 1, and we need to remediate that. And that site is essentially not, we can't go on it for any reason because it is contaminated. Whereas we have areas that they were cleaned up and remediated, but maybe don't meet the new regulations. So we need clarity on that. So they're sort of in between. And right now, unless we invest more money, we can't say that we can move forward on those sites. There might be alternatives, whether that is a license of occupation, license of use, non-registered leases. So there's a lot of things we need to look at for those. But again, now that that still may be triggered with a building permit. So there's a lot of staff time that's going to be required to really investigate this and see how can we develop, where can we develop. And further to that, sort of with the development guidance, it's been challenging trying to manage all of these interests who come in like, oh, we'd like to build this here and do this. We don't have an application process and we don't have staff resources or expertise. Like we're really struggling to manage this. And part of it is even just having sort of a development plan and business plan. And so we think that that would be a really good next step. We've talked with a few other airports of similar size and airport consultants. And really they say, you know, a development and business plan for $10,000 or $15,000 would do us a great service, right? But in order to do that, we really need to finish a few more things, right? So we need to finish our airport, the servicing plan. We need to make clear on our land use plan. And then we can also have a business and development plan. And then we'll have those specific process development guidelines, and we would actually be moving forward. So from our perspective, we've tried to really drill down and develop an action plan on how we can move forward on with development. So the recommendation of this report is that the committee recommend that the board support in principle long-term development planning for the lands at the Long Beach Airport and direct staff to complete an assessment of resource needs and financial implications as part of this objective. So we're really looking for support in principles so that we can go back, look at what it will take for us to actually move this action plan forward, and we can do that as part of the financial planning process.
Well, thank you for that, Jenny. Yeah, it's a huge, huge undertaking. And as you have clearly stated, one step at a time, let's get the infrastructure potentially in place. And to do that, you need a proper business plan. So I think, and I applaud staff for the work. I mean, I know that the workload is horrendous. So one thing at a time, I guess. And any comments from any of the other members? Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. And well, right off the bat, you know, obviously with the increased interest over the years, exponential increase in interest over the years on those lands, this report, and thank you staff for this report, it has made very clear to me what is necessary to support the long-term development and investment in land at the Long Beach Airport for the well-being of the communities of the West Coast, frankly. And I believe staff has laid out what I consider a very realistic action plan to accomplish those planning goals, and have identified ways in the financing actions and the appropriate staffing resources that will be needed to forward those recommendations. I also, I believe it would be irresponsible for us to proceed at an ad hoc fashion, such as we've been doing over the last number of years, without a comprehensive plan to guide that decision-making process for there. And so I just have, in terms of the specifics on those action plans, there was just a couple of comments more regarding that, and specifically on, and I don't know if on that action plan as laid out in the report, Jenny, if that was in order of priority, the five actionable areas, but the one area that I comment on is that the draft finalized report of the 2018 plan and the importance of moving that forward. Within there, I think it's critical, and you've laid out that the engagement with stakeholders, and I always have problems with that word stakeholders, but that engagement process is critical. And I believe with TFN, that is the most critical component, as you pointed out, as the rightful owners of that territory. And so they are a critical component of that. And I know you've laid that out in the report and have identified that, but I do want to stress the importance of that in moving forward. And within there, within that 2018 draft plan, I did note that it did not align with the, for example, the campground usage, that long-term residential use. And I don't know at what opportunity there is now in this, at this stage of the report, if there is room within there to have further discussions about that larger visioning process within there that may or may not encompass support for such as residential usages up there as a key value or mission, as you've laid out in the report, or maybe just as a component of that overall plan. And so I think that's something that I don't know what opportunity there is left in the engagement process to be able to maybe look at where that, if it is appropriate, where these key values might be able to be in place. So those were the two major ones that I have in there for moving forward. And if there is that opportunity, it certainly would like to be involved if that was possible in there. In terms of the specifics that you've laid out in terms of those servicing levels, that's a lot of staff work. The one thing I just did note in terms of wastewater or sewage capacity, I know, as I'm sure everyone is aware, that Tofino is in hopefully the very, very final stages, and there is discussions with TFN in terms of their ability to integrate into that system. And I don't know what the realities, but it certainly, as you pointed out, the capacity issues with the two methods that you had brought forward would not be sufficient, obviously. And I don't know if there is the ability to engage Tofino specifically on that in terms of being able to tie into that system. I know it's just to add to your workload, of course, but that is a possible opportunity. I don't know, but I suspect those conversations at least could be had. So that's all I have to say. And if there were no other comments, I certainly would be comfortable moving the recommendation as presented in this report.
Are there any other comments? Well, thanks for that, Tom. And you're moving the report that the West Coast Committee recommended the Board of Directors support in principle long-term development planning for lands at the Long Beach Airport and direct staff to complete an assessment of resource needs and financial implications to support this objective as part of the 2020-2022-2026 financial planning process. Is that correct?
I will move that recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Alan and Michelle. So carried. Thank you. Thanks, Jenny, again. Much appreciated. Next item under reports is the Millstream Water System audit of multiple consumer units. E, and that's from, E, that's Eddie. Eddie Kunderman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be speaking on Eddie's behalf on this one. So What we've done is in the Millstream water system, it's relatively small and there are no meters. So everyone is billed on a per unit basis. There is a number of properties that have multiple units. I think there's one that might have 4, but say 2. Those are revenue generating properties in many cases, and the consumption is more. And without it being metered, we updated the bylaw quite some time ago in 2019 to make sure that the water rates should be applicable per unit so that everyone is paying a fair and equitable charge. We finally finished an audit to confirm which units are going to be, which properties have more than 1 unit. So we will be sending a notice out to the property owners, letting them know that we have identified them as multiple units, and we will be adjusting their charges accordingly. So that's going to be going out shortly, and then the billing increases as of March 1st, 2022. So they'll get quite a bit of advance notice. And if they have concerns or if we're incorrect in our assumptions, we can go and do a building site inspection just to confirm that it is not an extra dwelling unit. So we've got the process in place for that, and that should increase revenue by about $10,000 for that water system. But more importantly, it is an equitable application of payment for the system.
That's terrific. Thank you very much for that report. That's next is item B, West Coast Organics Diversion Project update. And that would be Jody Frank, but I see it's probably Jenny Brunnigan.
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm letting staff actually work, and doing the committee work on their behalf. So we wanted to update everyone on the phase 2 for West Coast Organics. We're all getting very excited about this. So hopefully you've had a chance to read through the report. I'll do a quick overview, and I suspect you may or may not have questions. We actually just had a meeting this morning with our stakeholders. So we do meet regularly with all the First Nation partners, as well as the district and District Recycle BC, our operators, all of sort of the key components for people that need to be involved as we work through what this rollout is going to look like. So we are proposing to have a 3-stream automatic curbside collection program. That's going to be starting in the fall once the capital work's done and we actually have an organics facility. But we are starting definitely a year ahead to make sure that we are in a good place for that. So for the West Coast, what that's going to look like is a 120-liter organics cart, a 120-liter garbage cart, and a 240-liter recycling cart. So in the city of Port Alberni, when we did rollout of phase 1, we actually chose to go with a 240-liter organics cart. We've done a little more assessment. We actually feel that a smaller organics cart is more appropriate on the West Coast. The landscaping style is significantly different in Port Alberni than it is on the coast, but we are going to allow people to choose, if they wanted to start with a 240, they can. So we're going to be doing a mail up, but the default size is going to be the smaller 120. In some cases, some residents might want a 240. There will be a slightly higher rate for that. That's fine. And people will have that option. So we hope to get that sent out as a notice as part of sort of the information package to people, I think early in the new year, if not possibly in December. The other case is we're doing a bit of an audit in the system. There may be some situations where we've got a duplex and we're going to recommend actually that they have one shared 240. And that has a lot to do with the available curbside space. So some places are relatively dense, and so we don't want everyone having 3 carts out at the system at the curb, in which case we are actually going to be looking to modify the system to make it fit what's happening on the West Coast. It's not a tiny system, but it is relatively small. So we do have the capacity to do that and make it a system that fits what's there. As far as the upgrades for the landfill, we are doing upgrades at the tipping area to basically address so that people can come and dump organics and yard waste, but also dealing with some of the stewardship programs, and it's time. We really need to upgrade that, and we're going to do that as part of this. We're also obviously building an organics composting facility. So we're working on that right now. And what it looks like is a ASP, so aerated static pile composting system. basically, there are piles of compost. We windrow them, but we put a pipe with holes in it down the middle underneath, and then it pushes air out. That air helps those organisms work faster because they can stay aerated. So really, it just allows us to process that compost so much quicker. So planning for that is underway right now. We expect to be issuing an RFP for the technology equipment. So not the building, not the foundation, but sort of like the cupboard. Well, actually we're going uncovered, but for the pipes and blowers, and that technology should be going out shortly. We are hoping to do all of the construction for the tipping area in the summer of 2022. We like to work in the summer when it's dry if possible, and have it all ready to go by the early fall. And then we will roll out the curbside collection in the fall of 2022. Another component of the curbside collection is we are hoping, we've been working on a staff level with, who we're working with Brett and with Sean Quick in the 2 First Nations for Tloquiet, as well as Ukulithat. And we are seeing if maybe Hatatsu is interested in joining the system, as well as Esawista and Taistanis. So we're working through those details. The only thing that we need now is we're actually still waiting for a formal request from those political boards back to us so that we can enter into a service agreement. So from a staff level, I know there's a lot of support, and then we just need to do that next step. And so we're excited about that if that moves forward. Engagement and outreach. So as a tentative schedule, because you will hear lots about this and probably be involved in it, we are right now preparing the key information materials. We're working we have a Let's Connect webpage, but a specific webpage for organics diversion. We'll have the page specific to the West Coast created and launched shortly. And a lot of the key messages and frequently asked questions. Luckily, a lot of the footwork has been done in phase 1, but we want to tweak it so it's very specific to the West Coast. January to May, we're going to basically tell everyone that this is what's happening, do press release, radio ads, communicate about this well in advance. And then we need to also work on the welcome package that people will be receiving, a lot of the how-tos and collection information. In September, we do the program rollout. And when we do that, we're going to obviously host a lot of information sessions, remind everyone, this is how you use the system. And then after we've launched it, then we do the implementation. Make sure everyone's using it correctly. We educate, and then we enforce. So there will eventually be a fine or a slap if you can't, 3 strikes, like that's a lot of strikes. So we give everyone a lot of opportunity because we want everyone to come on board voluntarily, and change is challenging, so we are patient. Surfrider has been essential, and they're a great part of our basically our working group right now, and they're going to help us a lot with the education program. They've got boots on the ground, they're very effective, so we're happy we've got that relationship built. A little bit of the costing on this. So right now our current estimates are 4.15 million for the landfill upgrades and the organics facility. We wanted to make sure at this point that we let you know that that is a lot higher than what the cost estimates were originally. So there's a little bit of an increase in scope. We're doing more of the tipping area upgrades for sure. But also a lot of it is just as Tofino experienced with the wastewater project, we've seen huge increases in costing, right, over the last few years. So I think it was in 2018, we had our original estimates, and they've just, really dramatically increased. We do have grant funding available, but if depending on how phase 3 goes, which is the electoral areas, we'll see if they want to proceed with that. We hope to know by sort of mid-spring. And if not, then we want to basically at that time look at where we're allocating the grant monies. So we have to do a review of that, but we wanted to give you a heads up. It's going to be a little bit more expensive. We have many options for financing this because we have revenue coming in through tipping fees, and we really want to manage people's use to divert as much as possible. As far as cost estimates go, so we are looking at approximately $200 per household, which is more than the current rates. The current rate for curbside collection is $120 per year. That is rock bottom cheap compared to anyone else, but it is only garbage and recycling. So that's going to go up. Our estimate for the actual collection costs is $150. And then unfortunately or fortunately, when we buy these carts, although they're grant funded, we're going to have to replace them. So we know we'll have to replace them in 15 years. So we have to start putting that money away. And that's actually where the other $50 will increase. And the garbage carts actually weren't eligible for funding. So, but $200 still compares very well. And if you consider, you know, how much you pay per month, I don't know, what is that, $15 a month for 3 streams of garbage, I think you're getting an excellent value. But that'll be part of our education and outreach and information, because we recognize it is going to be an increase, and hopefully people will see the value in that as we move forward. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. So I'm familiar with the cart process and the alternate. Every pickup every week is organics, and you alternate between garbage and recycling. It's terrific. I think $200 is a bonus, considering the support from the cart system and so on and so forth. I know that on the RDN side, all the carts have little chips in them, so if they go missing, they can track them, which is fair. And I love the idea of the cart system, because we've just finished discussing bear awareness and that program. So I don't know if they've made a cart yet that's indestructible to bears, but on our end, where I live, they've left them alone. So out of sight, out of mind, sort of thing. Thank you. Any questions from any of the other members? Oh, Tom, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you once again, Jenny. A comment and just and a question. Just thank you once again. This is highly anticipated at my end. It's believe it or not, one of the more common questions I get from many of the local residents moving forward on the organics diversion project. So that's wonderful. And the time frame, as you alluded to, we're roughly looking at late fall 2022, or maybe a little later than that, if we're to be realistic. And so that's in my update. That's what I'll bring forward. In terms of the financial impacts, and I agree 100%. This is a service deal for what we're being offered. In terms of the financial impacts, you alluded to many of the different options that we may have. There are obviously some cost escalations as we increase the service level of what we're going to be offering. And will that come up later on when you have all the variables that may go into that, and that'll be presented to the committee and further up to the board at that time, I suspect.
Through the chair, yes. So we're not ready to present those just because we've got a lot of unknowns. I think by March at the latest, we will know. And then the other component is our landfill leachate upgrades, because it'll be nice to sort of look at nailing that down as well. And we can look basically at the West Coast landfill and its long-term funding and financing for all of its capital upgrades. So what do we need in the long run? We can do long-term borrowing for that, and then really recover those costs through tipping fees. Or we can look at the option of a tax requisition, which I personally am always a supporter when it comes to waste management, that it's all funded through tipping fees where possible. That does become a bit of a challenging model when your diversion gets very, very high and you're trying to generate all the revenue to recover that off of a tiny portion. So, but as it stands, I think it's still a model that would be sustainable for us for quite a long time. So I expect we'll get back to you in March, or at least at the next, maybe even at the next committee meeting.
Great. And I do want to applaud in terms of even specifically as small down as the carts, and recognizing as asset management the importance of planning out into the future. So I really appreciate the forethought that has gone into that, as we know down the road in 15 years, if we plan for it now, that bites, well, a little bit of pain now as opposed to a lot of pain in the future. So I do appreciate looking at it in that direction. Thank you once again.
Thanks, Tom. And again, thank you, Jenny. Are there any other comments or questions from anybody? No? Hearing none? Well, thank you again. Moving on, we have the Long Beach Airport Contamination Stage 1 report from Michael McGregor, and I guess, I don't see Michael there. It's either Jenny or Mark Fortune. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes. We did complete, I talked about this a bit when we were talking about the first report and the development, and this ongoing issue that we've had. So we spent quite a bit of time working with our consultant on this plan and trying to, a lot of work goes into this contaminated sites. It's pretty complicated. And we have managed to basically create a document that we feel we can use generically for a number of sites that do not require further investigation. That is as green a light as we're going to get for some of these properties. Those properties, we feel fairly confident that we actually could move forward with long-term leasing. That is, so of the 7 items that could stop us from moving forward with a long-term lease, this is one of them. And with that, we feel that this is no longer a stopping point for those. That's great news. And this information is going to feed into a business and development plan and allowing us to, one of the reasons we wanted to bring it to the committee is also just to make this information public. So any interested developer or interested party could look at this and see the map themselves and see where development has been cleared through stage 1. The other properties, and some of them are the very high value properties. So we have 2 empty lease lots available that are actually airside and have access to the taxiway. They do not get cleared in this case. And so the next step to look at whether we could move forward with that is going to be doing a stage 2. Stage 2 is looking at borehole. We have to drill holes, send away contaminated send away sites, and then that may clear it, or it may say, no, you actually have to remediate the site. So it's just not it's not a green. Maybe it's a yellow. We don't know what it really looks like, but it is much more cost and investment. And so we need to look at, is there other options we can move forward with? And I think I mentioned, because I was sort of talking a lot in the first report, that we're also concerned that at a building permit level, that might actually restrict moving forward on any kind of fixed buildings. So we need to do a lot more investigation on the contaminated sites. We are working with the, we've sent the letter off, I believe, to the federal government and to our local MP about contaminated sites and dealing with the remediation of the actual contamination that we found on one of the sites. Whether or not we're going to get some support to deal with existing asbestos in buildings or items that were cleared is uncertain. We will continue to pursue that and we will see what we can do, but we have to just take our time and move forward with that. However, there is one small sort of good news in this. Some of the properties at the airport, we feel we now have documentation that would allow longer term leases to move forward without this holdup. So that's the one takeaway from this. And the other is just that there's a lot more work to do on contaminated sites on a lot of the properties. I think that's everything, unless there's any questions.
Thanks, Jenny. Again, any questions? I just want to say I've had a quick review of this stage 1 report, and it is extremely well done, but very time consuming to review. And we know the situation. I've heard it. We've heard it in the past in our previous meetings about the contamination that exists. And, you know, here you are. Now you've got the airport. Take care of it. Well, I'm glad to see that the federal government hopefully is paying attention and step forward and help with the remediation there. Anyway, any other comments? Seeing none, thank you, Jenny. Much appreciated. The motion is that the West Coast Committee receive ports A to C. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Alan. I saw your fingers up there. All those in favor? Cheers. Thank you. Is there any late business that we're aware of?
No, Mr. Chair, not that we're aware of.
Thank you. There is one item of late business that I would like to bring up, and that is, I see Tricia's on the line there. From my position as the chair of the West Coast Committee meeting and all of the other committees that we're involved in, I just want to acknowledge the fact that Tricia Bryant, unfortunately, or fortunately, as the case may be, will be leaving us as of tomorrow. She is the acting CFO for the ACRD under Terry, and Tricia will be moving to City of Parksville. So congratulations, Tricia, and all the best moving forward. And now question period. Are there any questions or comments from the public?
So there's no one attending in person today. There's nobody participating on the Zoom meeting, and there has been no emailed questions about the meeting to the ACRD email.
Thank you for that, Terry. Next up is a motion to adjourn. Thanks, Rochelle. I see you there. And thanks, Kirsten. Sorry I missed you earlier. I think you came in a little bit late, but glad to see you here. Thank you. Anyway, do I have a seconder in that motion? Thanks, Kirsten. All those in favor? Cheers. Have a good weekend. Thank you.